So hello, welcome to the last video for the SSU preparation. I am assuming that you have watched the introduction to mental illness and the movies video that talks a little bit about me and talks a little bit about what the learning should be and how I'm expecting you to learn, and then the philosophy primer where I discuss the meaning of epistemology, methodology and aesthetics, and also the film primer, which is where I talk about what is art form and what is specific to the form of film, and also the different elements of film. Yeah, so those are 10 minutes or so videos. Is a bit more substantial because this is getting to grips with the key elements of the SSU. Okay, so what we're going to do in this video today is to cover three things, which is how we make meaning out of watching a film. Yes, so from interacting with the form of films. The second one is how are we supposed to learn and what are we supposed to learn from watching films. And the third one is this idea of narrative competence, which is the aim of the whole overall module, what I'm aiming for you to acquire from this module. Yes. So we're going to do this in the next few minutes, and before we engage in any of those three things, I'm going to ask you to watch a little sequence, another 2-minute sequence. You remember in the film primer we watched a sequence of Battleship Potemkin. We're going to watch another sequence, and I'm going to stay quiet whilst you do that, and I'll pick you up in 2 minutes or so.
Tu vas lui expliquer d'abord, ok, si tu m'expliques que tu...
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. To recap, yes, form. Yes, so we just experienced film form, which is the different system of relationships between the different elements of what you just watched, and we talked about those elements in the previous video. What you've seen is 2 minutes of a film called Collateral from 2014. Yeah, so you've watched minute 2 and minute 3, which is how they the film introduces us to one of the main characters. And what you've experienced is a narrative form, so they've told you a story, and stylistic form, so you've experienced film. Yes, I'm going to spend some time now discussing the stylistic element, the stylistic form of what we just watched, and then I'll spend some time talking about the narrative form of these specific things, and in the process we'll tackle this thing about meaning making whilst interacting with art. Yes, so the stylistic elements. So you remember from the film primer, we've just seen shots. Yes, so moving images, a series of moving images, but the moving images one by one. What we can tell about the shots you've just seen is that most of them have significant movement. So there's always either the camera is moving or somebody is moving. There's movement in every shot. Yes, we've also experienced lots of close-ups. So the camera, there is some shots from the back, but most of them are close-up to the point where in the first 10 or 12 films you don't even know what you're looking at because you're so close. We also experienced bright colors. There's lots of reds, lots of yellows, sort of that was common to most shots. And most shots are very short. Yeah, so I think I counted something like 35 shots in a period of 2 minutes, so most of them really short. So that's the stylistic elements of those particular shots. Yes, I could go one by one, but maybe you want to do that. If you rewind the video, you can watch it again and look at each shot at a time. The other thing that we've seen by interacting with those shots or watching those shots is we've seen this other film element, which I introduced in the film primer, which is the idea of mise en scene, what the director chooses to put in front of you. So they've put, this is filmed in a taxi station, and there's lots of people, and the people are multicultural, and there is a taxi driver in his taxi. So that's the mise en scene. That's what the director chooses to put in front of the camera. Yes, it's another stylistic element. How people are dressed, how people are lit, and that kind of the aesthetics of it. The other element is when you see a series of shots, you are seeing a sequence, which is a particular element of film. We discussed that in the primer. The idea is you see one moving image after another moving image, and the sequence of images creates a story. So there is something about that sequence that you've just experienced. So there are about 13 or 14 shots that are of nothing in particular. They're just setting up the scene until you get 2 long pan shots. Pan means that the camera moves. So there's a pan shot horizontal where you see 3 or 4 people, and then there's another pan shot which is vertical upwards, which is how they introduce you to the main character. So it starts and his legs moves up, his torso, and then his face. Yes, and that's a key point in the sequence. What you then do is you have a series of 10 shots or so about this subject doing stuff, doing things. So he's moving, he's interacting with the taxi. Yes, and then you get 3 shots of him leaving. That's the structure of the sequence. That's the narrative of the sequence of shots. Yes. The other bit of stylistic elements that you've experienced is the sound and the music. It's quite striking, isn't it? So you hear a lot of noise, and you hear people talking in different languages, and you have a driving beat, doom, 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 from the very beginning. Yes, and then there's another feature of the sound music elements of this shot is that at one point there is a silence, sort of it closes the door and it all goes quiet. It's like a pause in sound. Yes, and then it goes back. Yes, so these are the stylistic elements that we've experienced in those 2 minutes. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at the sequence in a bit more detail. So the sequence, like I said, is a series of introductory shots. Yes, and they're all kind of bright colors, foreign letters, camera is moving all the time, one side to the other, zooming in, zooming out, there's noise. There's one shot that goes horizontal with people, and then more of the things where they let you know this is a car workshop. Yes, and then it sets kind of the scene. You don't see anything other than the place. Yes, so this is the kind of set of 13, 14 shots of introduction to the main character. Yes, so once that's done, there is a significant shot which is the main character. Like I said before, is a pan upwards, and it ends up with his face. And the first thing you see him do is he looks somewhere. And then you have another shot that shows you what he's seeing. So he's seeing somebody in the exit. And after that, he gets into his taxi, he closes the door, and he cleans it. Yeah, so he cleans it thoroughly, and after he's finished, he checks the lights, the indicators. There is one shot intercalated with him checking things, which is the chaos outside of the taxi, which helps when he closes the door and the thing silences. And then there is the shot of him putting the card on his taxi, letting you know who he is. That's if you want chapter 2 or the second set of shots. Yes, so the shots where they're no longer showing you the garage, they're showing you the main character. So another collection of shots of the main character doing stuff. And this moves on to a longer shot, which is when he takes a picture of an desert island and puts it in his visor, and he looks at it. Yes, and then he starts the car, and then he leaves. As he leaves, there's somebody looking at him. So this guy is in two shots, one of him looking, and then a wider one where you see him looking at the taxi leaving, and then there is the last shot, which is him driving literally into the Western world, into the like a Western scene, a desert, driving into the horizon with his taxi. He's actually going into New York, but visually he's going into the desert. Yes, and that's the 2-minute sequence that we've just watched. Okay, so that's the third kind of set of things. Now that's the stylistic, that's what we've seen, and that's how the choices the director has made in each moving image and the way he's put them together. And the purpose of this is the narrative elements. Yes, you remember stylistic elements, narrative elements. The narrative elements, the story they're telling you. Yes, so a narrative is somebody telling you what happened. Yes, that's it. That's a story. That's a narrative. Somebody tells you what happened. Yes, and this is what the director's just done. He's just told you what happened. This guy got into his taxi and drove away. Yes, the other issue of narrative, and why narrative is particularly important in cinema, is that narrative occurs across time. Yes, so the film takes time to tell you a story, and the story happens in time. It's not something that happens in one go, like a painting or a photograph. There is movement, there's time for movement to happen, there is a sequence, there is time to each of the elements. Yes, so time is both essential to narrative and is essential to the form of film narrative. Yes, good. So the three keywords to understand narrative are, the first one is, what is the text? So the text is what they tell you when they tell you what happened. Yes, and text refers to, in a novel, what's written, a text, but that's just a metaphor. What's written, the text is a bigger concept. It's also what you see. It's what they actually say. That's the text. Yes, the text of the story. But every story comes with a text, what is said, and then a different layer of meaning, which is the subtext, which is what they're telling you behind what they're telling you, the subtext. So the reading in between the lines, meaning that is made not from the words in the text, but from the meaning we ascribe to the text, or the meaning the author has put in the text without putting it in text. Yes, that's called the subtext. And sometimes the subtext is very obvious, so for instance, in this case there is a obvious subtext, which is this guy's looking at a picture of a desert island. He needs to evade himself, or this guy's cleaning the taxi very thoroughly. So he's showing you a guy cleaning very thoroughly, but the subtext is this very cautious guy, a very conscientious guy. He's saying that in the subtext, not in the text. Yes, and then there are hidden subtexts. So there are things that you're not aware that they're telling you this until later in the film or later in the story, and you only see the subtext in what you're observing when you watch it the second time. But the message is been given to you, if anything, unconsciously. Yes. So, for instance, the first time I watched this clip, I didn't realize there was somebody watching him go out. That becomes important later. So that is a subtext. Well, it's in the text, but there is a subtext that is some kind of menace, and that's hidden in that clip. Yes, and then there are partially hidden bits. So, for instance, they tell the subtext is this guy is trying to evade himself. That desert island is important, but you don't exactly know what's happening. So there's a partly hidden subtext. Okay, so it's important that when you hear a narrative, you know what is the text and what is the subtext. The next bit is the idea of context, which is the background on which the text and the context happen. So there are things that are not in the text or in the subtext, but they're in the background that the author's chosen to not highlight or not make important. They're the context, they're in the background. And sometimes the context is the context for the author, so what's going on for the artist when he's making that particular bit of art. And sometimes is the context of the art itself. So, for instance, this film is a thriller. So when you watch this film, you're watching it in the context of all the other thrillers you've watched before. Yes, so that's the context of the art form, the aesthetic expectation. So, for instance, the context of how this film, when this film was done, is almost 100 years after the Potemkin sequence that you saw before. There's a different context. You expect different things. You expect color. You expect more polish. You expect more elements in the art, because that's the context. It's a film made in 2014. And then there is the context of the experience, which is the experience of the art. So it's different to experience this bit of art in a big cinema or in a little phone. That's the context of the experience of reading the text. And then there is the context of the audience, so it's not the same experience as somebody who's already seen it, or somebody who hasn't seen it, or somebody who's read the book this is based on or not, somebody who's seen many films, or somebody who's never seen a film before. So that's the context of the audience who experiences the bit of art created by the artist. So context is a very wide thing, but remember those three words: text, subtext, and context. Okay, now those three words are going to make what is the narrative. Yeah, so, and the narrative that we've just seen is, we see a taxi station, it sets the scene, and then you see a taxi driver, then you see the taxi driver clean the cabin, then you see the taxi driver look at a picture, somebody watching him, and he drives off. That's what happened. That's the filmmaker is told you a narrative. This is what happened. Yes. What I've just described is usually referred to as referential meaning, which is what actually happens in the text. Yes, or what happens in the experience. Yes, so referential means that what you see, what you understand by what you see. Yes? And a good example of basic referential meaning. So when you only have referential meaning, is the first time anybody watched any film. Yes, and I showed you this clip of the first ever film, a train getting into the station. The people who watched this film could only understand referential meaning. Yeah? So what this meant to them was, there's a train coming. And what happened in the first screening of the train coming in the station, people saw that moving towards them, and they understood there's a train coming towards me, and everybody panicked and moved to the back of the room because they thought the train was coming into their room, because they were only able to make meaning out of what was referenced in the picture. That's called referential meaning. Okay, so that's one layer of meaning, referential meaning, which is what happens in the film, and then the other layer of meaning is the explicit meaning, which is what the author is saying to you by showing you what happened. Yes, so in this case, I've already told you the explicit meaning, what the author says. So he's saying there is a dynamic chaos in a garage in multicultural New York. Yes, and within there is a conscientious driver. Yes, and the conscientious driver is looking at a picture of paradise before he goes into the world. Yes, so it's something that is not said explicitly. It is not referred to, but it's said explicitly. The author set out to tell you that with the images they show you, even what he's telling you is not in the images themselves. So that's explicit meaning. And that's a contrast to another type of meaning, which is the implicit meaning, which is what the author says as well as saying what he is actually saying. So the meaning which is implied. Yes. So for instance, when he tells you he looks at a picture of an island, a deserted island, he is implying that he might have dreams of sometimes going into the island, or that he needs to distract himself from his reality. Yes, so there is a meaning which is explicit and a meaning which is implicit. Yes, and they're different. So the difference is that the explicit meaning is based on the text. You can find the meaning on the text, and it's intentional that the author puts that in the text, and the meaning is denoted. So denoted means it denotes the meaning. It follows. Yes, whilst the meaning in implicit, when it's implicit, is in the subtext, it's also intentional. The author wants you to get that meaning, but the meaning is acquired through connotation. There is a connotation. We all agree that a desert island has a certain meaning. So even though he doesn't say he wants to go to that island, there is an implicit meaning that you gather from the subtext. Yes, so there is explicit meaning and implicit meaning. There is more. There is another layer of meaning, which is the personal meaning, which is that when we watch a text and a subtext, we always make some meaning which is personal to us, which is independent to the author. Yes, so the author wasn't meaning to tell you something, but you get it because you know something that the author themselves don't know. Yes, a very good example of this is that if a respiratory physician watches this scene, what they look at those fingers and say, oh, there's a bit of clubbing there. Does he have a respiratory disease? Yes, which is, I'm pretty sure, something Anthony Mann didn't know when he chose that actor to do that bit, but it means something to somebody. Yes, and that's personal to that person and is independent from the author. Yes, so that's 3 layers of meaning, and then there is another layer of meaning which is more complicated, which is the idea of symptomatic meaning. So symptomatic meaning is a bit highfalutin, is the idea that the fact that we get that meaning from that text says something about us and about our culture and about the world, the context in which this work of art exists. Yes. So, for instance, we could say the fact that they show you a poor black man looking at a desert island wistfully says something about society. Is he trying to say something about race? Is this about black men, or is this about aspirational people who work as a taxi driver but has a bigger dream, and why do they need to do that in a film? What does it say to us that is what they have to say when they introduce a character? Yes, or is he making a comment on capitalism, about how his life is so alienated that he needs these dreams to think, and they're making a point about capitalism? Yes, by showing you that. So that the fact that that work of art exists says something about society. That's symptomatic meaning. Yes. So the first idea of this video was to understand how meaning is made in film, and we've talked about referential meaning, what it is, explicit meaning, what the author says, and implicit meaning, what the author says in between the lines, and then there is personal meaning, which is what that means to you personally, and symptomatic meaning, which is what the fact that that happens says about the wider context and the wider society. Okay, so that's making meaning. That was one of the 3 key ideas of this video. So I'm going to move to the second one, which is the idea of what are we supposed to learn from films and how are we supposed to learn from films. Yes, so learning refers to this thing called curriculum. Yes, curriculum is what you learn and how you learn it. Yes, so I told you what I'm expecting you to learn in the first video. I'm going to repeat it in a minute, but how are we supposed to learn from watching films? Yes, and in order to do this, I need to tell you a little basic concept of education. Yes, so you know how if you want to understand medicine, you need to understand biochemistry, and if you need to understand biochemistry, you need to know the cycle of Krebs. Yes, well, in education there is a similar thing which is called the cycle of Kolb. Yes, so and that's a theory of learning which I'm going to explain to you in 3 minutes, which is the idea that we learn from experience in a process. Yes, and the way Kolb described it is that learning from experience happens where you experience something, and then that experience leads you to an emotional response and a self-awareness that something's happened to you, and that then leads you to making sense of what just happened through thinking and conceptualizing. So you try to understand which concepts are there in the culture that helps you make sense, allow you to think about what you just experienced. And then once you are done with that, you're able to plan and organize how what just happened to you fits in the world and how you need to move next in the world so you can have the next experience. Yes, and the way you learn is by going through this process, and I've described it starting with an experience, but it might start with coming across a conceptual idea that then makes you plan to have an experience. Then you do have the experience, and then you have an emotional response. So the idea is we do those things. Yes, and the idea is not that there are learning styles, that there are people who experience and people who think and people who plan and people who are aware of responses. We all do that within a cycle, and learning happens when you go through this cycle over and over. And what you can do to learn is engage in reflection and thinking and cognitive processes at each of those. So for instance, the reflection between having an experience and being aware you've had the experience is being able to reflect about yourself. What is happening to me? How am I responding to this? Yes? The work between having a response and conceptualizing that response is interacting with the knowledge that exists about that. Yes, and then the interaction, once you've conceptualized what happened, you need to be able to relate those concepts to reality so you can plan and organize and then do something in the future. Yes, an example, year one, you're told you need to experience a birth. Yes, so you go and watch somebody give birth. Yes, and after you watch that, you get an emotional response. Yes, you get, oh my God, what just happened? Yes, and then what just happened was that this woman was screaming, and the gynecologist and the midwife were arguing, and there was a episiotomy, and there was blood all over the place. And that's what happened. So then you conceptualize it. You say, okay, what have I understood here? So you understand what an episiotomy is. You understand why they happen, why they don't happen. You understand the role of the gynecologist, the role of the midwives. So you conceptualize what's just happened. So that allows you to plan and organize and go and see another birth, and then you realize your context, so you organize to do it in another hospital, and once you've read the roles, you know what episiotomy is, how it's done, who does it. So then you go and have another birth experience, and this time, because you've learned, because you've gone through the cycle, you get a different experience. Yes? And then you start again. So that's the idea of the experiential learning cycle, or the cycle of Kolb. Yes. Okay. You need to know this because that's what happens when we watch a film. We have an experience. So what happens when we watch a film is an artist produces a narrative in the form of a film, and a teacher maybe makes you read a set of watch a video or read a paper. So there's a film about Temple Grandin, which is one of the first famous people with autism, and then I make you read a paper on autism. Yes, so that's the experience. You watch the film with the context I've provided you, but also the context of your own personal experience, because you have your own knowledge about autism, you have your own experiences, you have your talents and your tastes, and your references from other films and other novels and other things. So you have your own context that is going to interact with that narrative. And also there is the context of what's going on with you at the time. So it might be that at the time you're thinking a particular thing, you're feeling in a particular way, you're connected to people in a particular way. Yes. So all of that contributes to having what I've described before as an artistic experience. Yes, so you watch the film with your background, with your expectations, with your context. You have an experience. Yes, and then the idea is when you have that experience, what's going to happen, like Kolb says, is you're going to have feelings and emotions and things that are going to happen. You might be disgusted about this film, or you might be enthusiastic, or things, and you might be able to reflect and be aware of your own response to it. And then you're going to have an intellectual response. You're going to start thinking, oh, hold on, what's going on here? How is that? And you're going to try to make sense, conceptualize what happened. Yes, we are going to do this not by yourself, but we're going to do this in a group. So the idea is we are all going to be together. Everybody's going to have an experience of watching the film, and everybody's going to have their own responses, their own thoughts, their own feelings. And the key bit to the learning is that we are going to be able to share those. Yes, so that is how we're going to go through the experiential learning cycle. We experience something, we respond to it, we think, we conceptualize, we get the thinking and the concepts from other people, and then we plan what we're going to do with that experience and that concept, how we're going to apply that. Yes, so the cycle of Kolb whilst watching films. Yes, so that's the curriculum. So that's the how. Yes, and the next bit, which I told you I would repeat, which is what I am expecting you to learn. I told you at the beginning the learning objectives of the module, which is we're going to learn about pathology, we're going to learn about mental health, we're going to learn about how mental health impacts people and society. Yes, and we're going to learn how the stigma in society works around psychiatry. Yes, and the fourth learning objectives, which is the value of humanities, how the humanities can help us become better doctors. Yes, and that's what I'm going to do in the next few minutes of this video, because how the humanities can help us learn something called narrative competence, which is the overall aim of this video and the SSU. Yes, so let's spend a few minutes talking about this idea of narrative competence. Yes, so we are going to get a narrative from an artist. Yes, that's what we're going to do. A narrative, and we're going to get better at understanding and being able to understand narrative and think about narrative. Yes, so a narrative, when someone tells you what's happened over time, and that has a text and a subtext. Yeah, how is that related to medicine? Yes, can you think of any situation in medicine where someone tells you what happened? Yes, well, that's 90% of medicine. 90% of medicine is narratives that people give us and that we give people. So people say, oh, I was doing okay, and then I got this lump on my breast. I wonder where did this come from? Can you help me? And you say, well, let me tell you a narrative. That lump is a cancer that's developing in your breast, and you need to have chemotherapy, and then you will get worse and side effects, and then you'll get better, and then we'll operate, or you give in a narrative. So experiencing, listening, understanding to narratives is what we do in medicine. Patients give us narratives, and we need to be able to be competent at hearing them and understanding them and making meaning out of them. Not just patients, but also other doctors. So when we're not with patients, we're talking to other doctors and we're discussing patients, and that is just people pushing narratives. Yeah? So a GP makes a referral and says, would you see this boy? The mom came to me and told me he's got ADHD, but actually this is the fourth kid in the family, and I think he's not a very good mom. A narrative from the mom, narrative from the doctor. Then you meet them, you come up with another narrative. So it's medicine is a narrative between patients and doctors, and between doctors themselves. Yes. So being able to understand that when we take a narrative from a patient, we are doing the same process as when we are watching a film. The narrative is going to interact with our context, with the kind of upbringing with it, what we know, what our talents is, what experiences we have before, and also the context in which we are interacting with the patient. What are we thinking? How are we feeling? And where are we socially at the moment we interact with them? And that creates an experience of narrative, which is no different from the experience of a film. Yes, and we also have an emotional response to a narrative, like we always do, and we have a conceptual understanding of our emotional response, like Kolb said. Yes, so the experience of the idea of learning through experience and that having artistic experience, they both overlap, and they both overlap with the experience of interacting with narratives of patients. Means that being competent at interacting with narrative is essential to medicine. Yes, so we need to be able to know what the text is and what the subtext is when we hear a narrative. We need to be able to understand how that text interacts with our own context, both at the time and our background. We need to understand and being able to interpret the context based on our emotional and conceptualized response. Yes, so this is what makes narrative competence. Those three things and one more, which is another thing we're going to do, which is that we're going to have the experience of narrative in groups, like you will when you start working as a doctor. You need to be able to take those narratives and your response to those narratives and being able to share with people. Yes, you will go into a mess with other doctors and you will say, let me tell you what just happened. It's my narrative. Yes, and people are going to do the same to you. So you need to be able to hear somebody say, let me tell you what happened, and understand that this is a narrative interaction. Yes, so we're going to do this, and you need to be able to do those things in medicine. Okay, that's called communication, being able to share narratives and make the most out of sharing narratives. Yes, so that's called narrative competence. So what happens if you are a doctor who is competent at hearing, listening, making sense of, making layers of meaning, and communicating narratives, is that, first of all, you will be a much happier doctor. Yes, that allows you to be resilient in the face of horrible narratives that we are exposed to as doctors all the time. Yes, but most importantly, you will have happier patients, because the experience of patients being able to communicate a narrative and having the sense that somebody understands it is fundamental to not just their happiness and satisfaction, but actually to their health. Yes, and the last bit is, if you are competent in narrative as a doctor, you are a way better doctor. Yes, and that's the last bit. So just to recap this video, which is a bit longer than the others, three things: how we make meaning from interacting with a narrative, particular films, but how we make meaning out of narrative. So there is the referential meaning, the text, the subtext, the explicit meaning, the implicit meaning, the personal meaning, and the symptomatic meaning. Yes, what you're supposed to learn. Yes, so you're supposed to learn by engaging in this experiential learning and learning to go through all those 4 steps, because that is what is going to make you competent at managing narratives, which is the ultimate aim of the SSU. Okay, that's the last bit of this video, and from now on we're just going to watch and discuss films. Okay, looking forward to meeting you.